Okay, what Nira left off here is I am a lifelong progressive. My first election was in 1980, and I remember speaking to my dad right during the election. We were watching TV, and I made a mistake of saying, "Hey, Dad, that guy looks pretty good." And he said, "No, son, that is not the guy you're voting for." We lost that election. But that was my first opportunity to actually to vote, and like I said, I've been a progressive ever since, and my family as well. And so, but you know, why a chef? Why am I up here? I'm certainly not going to critique tonight's food or the lunch that we had at the Four Seasons, but I do want to talk about food. And what I want to talk about is, why should food matter to progressives? Why? Because we can win on this issue. We can win elections on this issue. And I know this because what Nira left out is I'm a co-founder of an organization called Food Policy Action. 5 years ago, we started writing scorecards. We grade Congress on how they vote on food issues. We also get involved in elections. 2 cycles ago, we got involved in one election. We don't have a lot of money, our organization. We got involved in one election. And it was our mission to get rid of Stephen Sutherland. Stephen Sutherland almost single-handedly killed the Farm Bill when he wanted to drug test SNAP recipients and make sure that SNAP recipients either were working or were in job programs. We decided to go into his district, and that night, in a very bad election cycle for Democrats, Gwen Graham got elected. So we know this is an issue that we can win on. Last cycle, we got involved and helped Josh Gottheimer get elected to Congress as well. So, this election, a lot of people after the election, they asked me, they said, "Tom, are you disappointed? Are you disappointed that you didn't hear food talked about more?" As Food Policy Action, we reached out to both candidates and asked them to give us their policy on food. As you can imagine, only one candidate did. But I heard food talked about all the time during the election. Didn't everybody else? No, you didn't, did you? It's because you weren't listening, okay? I heard national security talked about, right? We heard national security talked about a lot during the election, right? Well, right now, 75% of the young people who live in the United States, they can't qualify for military service, in large part because of nutritional deficits throughout their entire development. Malnutrition and obesity are often the same person and the same family are the reason why 75% of people that are eligible to join the military aren't joining. That's a national security issue. We heard about the environment, right? We heard Tom Steyer talk about the environment today. Number 2, besides transportation, and number 2, when it comes to the environment in terms of how we're producing food and the effects it has on the environment, is actually the number 2 contributor of greenhouse gases. So I heard food talked about a lot during the election when it comes to the environment. Healthcare costs. We heard a lot about healthcare. We're still hearing it. You want to bring healthcare costs down, we need a healthier nation. Right now, we spend $200 billion on costs associated to poor diets. $200 billion. I heard food talked about a lot during this election. And then education. We know that education is a key to upward mobility, and yet too many of our children are going to school in the morning hungry, and they can't possibly learn. So no, I heard this talked about all the time. So, about 6 years ago, my wife made a film called A Place at the Table. It was about hunger in this country. And I got to say right now, the fact that we have 42 million Americans in this country that cannot feed themselves is a national embarrassment. Only second to the man that occupies the White House. And in working on the film, very early on, what we discovered is that people in this country, they're not hungry because of scarcity. They're not hungry because of drought or famine or war. People are hungry in this country because we do not have the political will to make sure that everyone gets the proper nutrition that they should. We could change that. The other thing that we learned is, we heard a lot of big ideas today. And we heard Cory Booker talk about reaching high and reaching about things that you can't actually attain. But we know we can fix hunger in this country. We can cure it. we have the ability to end hunger in this country. And so as progressives, we have to stop talking only about protecting things like SNAP, which we should, and WIC, and school lunch, but we have to start talking about ending hunger, not just managing hunger. You see, because America's potential is its people. And when when the well-being is powered up, it powers us forward to amazing things. When people have fuel for the well-being, including healthy food and sound nutrition, they can in turn fuel the vibrancy of communities. Over the years, America has built a safe, abundant, and healthy food supply and a distribution system that's the envy of the world. But we also have a set of policies that create, protect, and share this abundance, like the Farm Bill and the Food Safety Act. But right now, because some communities aren't firmly plugged into the food system, 42 million Americans aren't getting enough healthy food to eat. In rural areas, where sometimes the nearest grocery store can be an hour away, it is difficult to access fresh fruits and vegetables. In manufacturing areas where jobs have dwindled, income levels are too low to afford sufficient healthy food, and it's still too high to qualify for assistance programs. Now, we've done a very good job of producing calories in this country, but nutrition is hard to attain. Calories are cheap, nutrition is expensive. The result is a serious national problem with food insecurity and the inability to secure healthy, sufficient food on a consistent basis. And food insecurity has a cascading effect on other areas of well-being. For example, food insecurity can, leads people to be more vulnerable to illness. People have to choose between medicine and meals. When kids don't get the proper nutrition they need, they fall behind in school. When low-income Americans are forced to rely on the cheapest, least nutritious foods, they get sick. Americans aren't starving, but they aren't thriving either. So when President Lincoln formed the Department of Agriculture in 1862, he called it the People's Department. Back then, more than half the Americans were farmers. Today, it's less than 2%, but 100% of everybody eats. So maybe it's time that we adapt the Department of Agriculture in the Department of Food. And so, if we had a Department of Food, here are some things that we could focus on. Ensuring families have access to healthy, affordable food that can be prepared quickly and easily. Environmental protections that safeguard our food supply from harmful chemicals and the overuse of antibiotics. Honest and transparent food labeling so you know what you're getting. Creating jobs by bringing real meal prep and cooking back into schools and promote a pathway for local farms to supply them. Reducing food waste. Funding research and technology on how to expand the yields of fruits and vegetables to bring the prices of produce down. A peach should not cost more money than a fast food hamburger. We need to support small family farms and incentivize them in sustainable growing practices. We need protections for children in the way unhealthy food can be sold and advertised, similar to ones that apply to tobacco or the alcohol industry. We need to work with the Department of Education to bring back nutrition and cooking classes back into schools. And we need to work with the Department of Labor to provide incentives for businesses to pay their workers enough to afford the dignity of providing food for their families with food stamps or without food stamps or charity. See, because I know and we all know that healthy food fuels potential, and a strong network of food policies keep it flowing. More and more Americans are telling us that they care about these things and they want our leaders to as well. Food is the fuel of human potential. Progressive moments are built on that exact premise, helping people and communities fulfill their potential. Smart, sane food policies will fuel America's progress. Thank you.